Hey gang, as true crime fans, we know there's always more to the story. And the start of a new year is a perfect time to start digging deeper into the mysteries that fascinate you with newspapers.com, the largest online newspaper archive.
Imagine uncovering the original articles that reported on infamous crimes or tracking down small town stories that haven't been told in decades. A subscription to newspapers.com unlocks over 1 billion, with a B, newspaper pages from across the US, UK, Canada, Australia, and beyond, dating all the way back to 1690 or as recent as a month ago.
You'll have access to stories that you will not find anywhere else. From front page headlines to forgotten cases that could inspire your next deep dive. Go down a rabbit hole of first-hand accounts, breaking news, and shocking details that didn't make the history books, all on newspapers.com.
For listeners of this podcast, newspapers.com is offering a special discount of 20%. Just use the code TrueCrimecast at checkout. The clues to history's mysteries are waiting for you on newspapers.com using code TrueCrimecast.
With so many options, why choose Arizona State University?
For me, the only online option was ASU because of the quality. Their faculty was really involved with their students and care about your personal journey. The dedication to my personal development from my professors, that's been extremely valuable to me.
Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
Stoveleg Media, igniting conversation.
This is True Crimecast. Jamie and John, our first recording of 2025. Can you believe it's a new year already?
It's went by fast. To be honest, the last 25 years have went by fast. I remember the year 2000 vividly, and it feels like just a blink of an eye ago, but so much has happened in those 25 years.
I got a text from my daughter, who was not at my house at the time, at midnight and said 2050 is just as close as the year 2000. And now she's grounded.
That makes me sick.
It does.
I don't think I'll make it.
I almost said that to her, but I didn't want to start off the year too morbid. I was like, yeah, that's a long time. It's forever.
No, I hope I make it. I'll be at the tail end of things, though.
Yeah, maybe we'll still be telling podcast stories because, unfortunately, the world of crime never stops. But you know what is a great way to start off the year? John, did I hear you're giving people a discount without consulting me?
Merry Christmas. No, as a late Christmas and a Happy New Year celebration, we are giving you a chance for new members to get 10% off your first month when you sign up for patreon.com. As little as $3 a month gets you a bonus episode each and every month, full access to our entire backlog of exclusive episodes, and our regular content early and ad-free. $3 a month, people. It's not much. You are missing out if you don't have it.
Yeah, we put it out on the first of every month, and this month's was a Vince McMahon story about the steroid scandal in the 90s, and I know we're diving deep in some other scandals here, but that's a fun one and is exclusive to our Patreon members. John, you said ad-free, and I heard dad-free. Unfortunately, there will be dad jokes.
2 dads and a microphone and a mystery. No, that should be our tagline.
Pretty much it.
No, but something else that I put on a Facebook post is you can listen to the patreon.com episodes within your podcast app.
Right.
Is that correct? So you get like a special link to do that. And then so you don't have to toggle to Safari or whatever internet browser you use on your phone. It's where you would normally find your podcast. It's easy, convenient, and there's a bunch of exclusive episodes.
I'm a member of the Vault for the Exorcist Files, which we've talked about quite a bit, and that goes straight into my feed, and I love it. I don't know if I would go through the trouble of listening elsewhere, but since it comes to my podcast app, I'm good to go.
I love it. It is super convenient.
John, we're diving into the most recent scandal, and maybe, again, I know Owen Hart died. Vince McMahon didn't kill him. Was there negligence? Yes. Was there a settlement? Yes. Were there legal issues? Yes. these accusations against Vince McMahon are the most heinous actions that we've talked about that could be connected directly to him. Last week, we talked about the Ring Boy scandal. We gave a background into who Vince McMahon is. Little quick refresher. He owned WWF, WWE, started it and ran it pretty much up until 2022 when a lot of these allegations started coming out and he kind of stepped aside. But he is kind of the creator of modern professional wrestling, of which we are fans to varying degrees. And he's gotten himself in some hot water on a number of occasions. And today's water is boiling. John, why don't you get us rolling?
Yeah, like you said, we're going to explore the most recent allegations. And to do that, we have to go back again into history of WWE. And we're going to be talking about a referee whose name was Rita Chatterton. Rita was known as Rita Marie when she was in the ring, and she was the first female referee in the WWE. She debuted on TV in 1985 at Madison Square Garden.
What a debut.
That is like the epicenter of it. You've made it when you have appeared at Madison Square Garden, and that was her debut. But she did not get there easily. Rita has said that executives Pat Patterson and Jay Strongbro tried to stop her from officiating her first match, and they only backed off, she alleges, when she threatened to sue them. In return, she alleges that the men encouraged wrestlers to injure her on purpose so that she would not be able to work with them anymore. But allegedly, the wrestlers refused.
Yeah, I don't remember Rita Marie. I was tiny when this happened, but in my upbringing, I was not, conversations about gender equality were not readily available in my home. So I wasn't even aware that she was the first female referee until we started researching this. Maybe that's good that my parents weren't making a big deal out of it in a negative way either, but didn't really know much about Rita.
I'm going to be honest, because of the time and the culture, I'm a little surprised that we're going as far back as we are to 1985. I would have thought this was a late 90s move, but yeah, good for them for at least making the effort.
Right. And we didn't even get female referees in the NBA till like, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago was too far. But yeah, so maybe ahead of the game in some ways, but did not make it in the most ethical way. In the early 90s, Rita would go on to accuse Vince McMahon himself of assaulting her, saying that McMahon forced her to perform sexual acts on him in his limo in 1986. Her attorney claims that she was fired, quote unquote, for cause the same year, but another source says she resigned. So if you're not aware, this does come up quite a bit when contracts are involved. If you're fired for cause, that means that you did something to violate the contract, and they can fire you without paying off your contract, essentially. If it's without cause, then that means they're going to have to pay you what they owe you, even though they're letting you go. So they're saying she was fired for cause. Others say she resigned. We really don't know. As a licensed referee, the New York State Athletic Commission sent her to work some smaller WWF events, but she declined to work shows where she knew that Vince McMahon would be present. Because the allegations from 1986 were made in 1990, after the statute of limitations had expired, no charges were filed against McMahon. We talked last week about how statutes of limitations, especially in crimes against children, should never expire, but we continue to see laws that do, and there's good reason for that in some cases, but you hate to see it here. Rita would step away from wrestling after the 1993 death of her close friend and wrestler, Andre the Giant.
I may not remember Rita specifically, but I will never forget Andre the Giant. And to know that she was friends with him, that's pretty cool. Rita's allegations resurfaced in June of 2022. There's a magazine, New York Magazine, and they were profiling her wrestling career. And as new sexual misconduct allegations were made against McMahon were starting to come to light. They also found one of her friends, a longtime wrestler, and he was able to corroborate Rita's story. Jamie, who is the wrestler? Because I've not heard of this guy.
I don't think most people are going to know him. His real name was Leonard Inzatari, but he went by Mario Mancini. and he had a very short-lived career. His first match was against Greg the Hammer Valentine, so that's pretty cool.
And again, he was able to corroborate Rita's story about the limo in the article. In December of 2022, Rita filed a lawsuit against McMahon where she was seeking $11.75 million in damages. And within a month, McMahon settled. And he continued to maintain that he was innocent, saying that he was only settling as a way to avoid litigation. But dude, this was a multi-million-dollar settlement.
Yeah, that's tough.
If I didn't do it, I'm not going to give you any of my money, and we're going to court.
He also has, I mean, I know he's not on the list of richest people in the world, but it's pretty close to infinite money, which I know sounds ridiculous. So who knows, maybe he was trying to get out from under all these other allegations that we're going to be talking about, but he did indeed settle. And remember, this is a civil suit. Statute of limitations had expired on a potential criminal case, but not a civil case. If he was settling this to try to avoid negative publicity, it didn't really work. Going back a few months, the Wall Street Journal reported that WWE's board was investigating a secret $3 million settlement that McMahon had made to a different former employee that he had had an affair with. This came out on June 15th of 2022. This woman was hired as a paralegal for the WWE, and McMahon doubled her salary as soon as they started having an affair. When the affair ended, their separation agreement in January of 2022 barred her from speaking about the matter, essentially making the payment hush money. So he had her sign an NDA. We know this happens. It's very unfortunate, but she settled to essentially go away. The board's investigation spiraled into a world of rampant sexual misconduct allegations, a real mess of some graphic assaults. They found that McMahon had paid a total of $19.6 million to 4 women over the course of 16 years, all for their silence over sexual harassment and sexual misconduct. These allegations included harassment at a tanning salon in Florida, and again at a tanning salon in California. Maybe the most shocking thing there is that they're still tanning salons. Another incident involved McMahon sending unsolicited nude photos to a WWE contractor, and he paid her $1 million to sign an NDA and not speak of it anymore. By July of 2022, the allegations were mounting. It was like a growing list of people who were accusing McMahon of everything from paying them off to harassing them to some more graphic things we'll get to in a minute. And McMahon, at this news, decided to retire from his role as WWE CEO and chairman. He announced this in a brief tweet. All it said, John, was "time for me to retire." That was his mic drop on his way out. He didn't elaborate. He didn't thank people. At the time, his daughter, Stephanie McMahon, stepped into his role as the CEO and chairman.
And that didn't last long. So Vince still had incredible power in the organization and then officially returned in January 2023 as the WWE executive chairman. Rumors ran wild that McMahon came back only to oversee the sale of WWE. Then in April of 2023, Endeavor Group Holdings announced a merger between WWE and the Ultimate Fighting Championship, UFC. Jamie, correct me if I'm wrong, but is that officially owned by Dana White?
He's a part of the group. I think he still runs it, but this is a corporation now. This group owns both together. It's called the TKO Group, and they oversee all of it. But yeah, that's Dana White's organization that he started.
Yeah. So on January 25th, 2024, McMahon was faced with yet another damaging lawsuit. Former WWE employee Janelle Grant filed a lawsuit in the United States District Court for the District of Connecticut against WWE, McMahon, and former head of talent relations John Laurinaitis. Janelle alleged that McMahon had sexually assaulted and trafficked her.
Trafficked. Like, to be clear, he's talking about giving somebody else possession of this woman, Janelle Grant, for sexual purposes. This is a whole new level of awful accusation. Just wanted to make sure we pointed out. We didn't just slide by that.
Yeah. Kudos for you for mentioning that. But it gets bad. This part, if you are listening and you have young ones in the room, this is something that you do not want them to hear. In 2019, Janelle was living in the same apartment block as McMahon. Her parents had recently passed away, and McMahon stepped in and offered her a job as a paralegal working for him. And Janelle said during her employment, McMahon recruited individuals for the sole purpose of sexual relations with her. And that's the trafficking. And it certainly gets worse. Some of the most astonishing allegations include that back in May of 2020, McMahon and a personal friend of his engaged in a threesome with Janelle, and McMahon himself defecated on Janelle and forced her to continue the threesome in that state.
Yeah, that's the graphic part.
The sickest thing I've heard so far about McMahon. She also said in June 2021, McMahon and Laurinaitis cornered her and pulled her between them, forcibly touched her before ultimately putting her on top of a table in between them. And she said that she was begging them to stop, but they forced themselves on her and they each took turns restraining her for the other. Janelle said that while she was employed, McMahon had shared sexually explicit content of her with UFC heavyweight champion Brock Lesnar. And this was a way to recruit him. And Lesnar did eventually sign a contract with WWE. So perhaps there is some, perhaps there is some truth to this.
Absolutely. And these are all allegations, but we'll talk about this. This was the big one, right? This was the one that was out there in the public in a huge way and really started to put the pressure on McMahon. So we're going to take a break. When we get back, we'll talk about the fallout from this accusation with Vince's marriage, WWE, and Vince himself. To talking about Janelle Grant's accusations against Vince McMahon, she claimed that this misconduct and the abuse and trafficking continued between Vince McMahon and other WWE executives until 2022. And it only stopped then because Linda McMahon found out what was happening and threatened to divorce Vince. After months of negotiations, the WWE as a corporation, Vince McMahon and Janelle all signed an NDA, so a non-disclosure agreement, where she was awarded $3 million, but was never allowed to talk about this again. After signing the contract, Janelle alleged that McMahon attempted to assault her again after this. She also claimed that everybody in WWE were fully aware of what was happening behind closed doors, and not only were they ignoring it, they were actively covering it up. Now, this lawsuit came at a very important time for the WWE. Just 2 days before, WWE had closed a deal with Netflix to have the rights to WWE Raw. And as we sit here today on January 7th, that started yesterday. The first Raw on Netflix was yesterday. That same day, they announced that Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson was appointed to the TKO board. So he has a voice in the bigger corporation that now includes WWE. So they had a lot of positive business momentum here, but the Vince news really kind of took the air out of their sails, and they released a statement saying that the allegations were going to be taken seriously and that they would look into them. And McMahon denied the allegations and vowed to vigorously defend himself.
On January 26th of 2024, TKO executives met with McMahon in order to convince him to resign. And that night, McMahon publicly announced his resignation as TKO executive chairman. The next month, February of 2024, the Wall Street Journal reported that federal investigators were looking into all the sexual assault allegations against McMahon and whether his hush money payments violated federal law. Rita Marie was named in the grand jury subpoena as one of the women whose claims were being investigated. On May 30th, 2024, Janelle agreed to, quote, stay her case, basically kind of push pause on everything. And this was against McMahon, and they agreed to do that for 6 months so that the Department of Justice could launch their own investigation into the matter. And that stay expired on December the 11th, so that case is now able to proceed.
Vince always had a very creative, but also a very sick mind. I mean, he came up with a lot of the main stories that were popular with WWE. He created the superstars that wrestling fans all know and love. But like I said, he was also very sick. John, you and I sometimes just talk about wrestling when we were kids. We were growing up during the Attitude Era, which was really the point in wrestling history where they decided to lean into sexuality, to inappropriate jokes. It wasn't for the kids then, even though you and I were kids and watched it. But he came up with some storylines that were just so hard to wrap your mind around. In the Mr. McMahon documentary, we'll talk more about a bit. We've mentioned it a couple times, but it came out this year about Vince. In this documentary, he himself talks about an angle that he pitched where his daughter, Stephanie, would become pregnant. Now, her marriage was part of an angle once, of a story angle before she actually got married. So she had been in some weird relationship angles before. But in this story, if it went Vince's way, his daughter was going to be pregnant with his baby. And that was going to be an angle on television. I'm assuming this is the first you've heard of this based on your face.
I vaguely remember this. Did you say what year this happened? I'm sorry if I missed it.
This would have been in the early 2000s.
Yeah, maybe that's when I stopped.
Maybe that's why we stopped.
Yeah.
So somebody pushed back on him and said, Vince, we can't do that and have you assault your daughter to impregnate her. He said, okay, I get it. What about her brother Shane? Such a sick mind.
Why not like Steve Austin or somebody else?
I mean, pick anybody else.
Or a completely different storyline.
Anybody that you're not related to. Everything during that area was hypersexualized. They made the WWE Divas division where the matches were more about sexual fantasies than actual wrestling. And despite Vince McMahon being open about many of his nefarious ways, he always tried to make himself, when it came public, look like a victim. He spent decades complaining that Ted Turner stole wrestlers for World Championship Wrestling, even though he did the same thing the entire time. And in fact, he put several companies out of business by doing that. He wore a neck brace during the steroid trial, a move used often by wrestlers to get sympathy from fans to try to make himself look less intimidating during the trial.
Dude, correct me if I'm wrong, but he wore the same thing multiple times, like as a storyline bit.
Oh yeah,
like on air.
Yeah,
for wrestling.
Vince put him in Stone Cold put him in a neck brace a dozen times.
So you're saying that this wasn't a bit. He was doing that in court to try to gain sympathy.
That's what most people claim. There was no injury to note, but there's also no proof that he didn't have one. So
that's incredible.
In the Netflix documentary, again, it came out earlier this year. It's called Mr. McMahon. It provides evidence of decades of scandals and shady business practices that McMahon still defends with a significant level of delusion. In fact, he starts the documentary by saying that he can't tell the real stories of decades in the business. He said, I wish I could tell you the real stories. Holy shit. But he doesn't tell you the real stories. But I just told you a story about him wanting to pretend to impregnate his daughter. So if that's stuff he's saying out loud, what's he hiding?
It's on telling.
The interview asked him to share just one of these stories, and he said, no, I don't want anyone to know the real me. I know he played a villain on wrestling, on TV, but it's like he wants to be this real life villain, like for real.
He played it well, because I did, like, as a fan of wrestling, I low-key hated him just because he was always the bad guy. But now to know that in real life, he was just as dirty and as a weasel as he was on his character, like that makes that hatred even more real.
It makes you wonder how much of a character it was and how much of it was just being him. All these allegations from Janelle Grant came out in the middle of filming this documentary. And the last episode was filmed without Vince, because after that came out, he did not do any more interviews. The results of the ongoing investigation and lawsuits may show us who the real McMahon is after all is said and done. But John, just to recap what we've talked about there, let's start with the Ring Boys from last week. All kinds of underage boys, teenage boys, were being assaulted by a variety of people or threatened by a variety of people within the WWE.
And as far as we know, that wasn't Vince McMahon directly, but it was people who worked under him. But he and his wife did know about the allegations and continued to let those people be employed with the organization.
Which ultimately, I mean, you and I know it. If you're in charge of something, you're responsible for everything that happens underneath you.
Especially like we talked about last week. I mean, one of the gentlemen, shouldn't say gentlemen, one of the men, the perpetrators was fired and then let back on with the organization with the promise that he would not do that anymore to boys. So that is directly tied to Vince McMahon's wife.
Guess what? He did.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like there is no plausible deniability when you hire somebody, they commit some kind of deplorable act, and then you continue to bring them back to it, expecting them not to do it. Like, I don't know. I'm just frazzled. I can't understand the logic behind any of this. So that's the Ring Boy scandal. And that has come back up in the news lately. There are several new people that were young men working for WWE that are speaking out about being assaulted by people and the culture that allowed that to happen in WWE. Over on Patreon, we talked about the steroid scandal. Essentially, steroids were made illegal in the 90s in America, and Vince was caught. I mean, the accusations were giving wrestlers steroids, and if you watched any wrestling in the 80s and 90s, they were on the juice.
Yep.
So,
and then hired a doctor to prescribe this to every one of his employees.
Yeah.
Which again, now to get prescribed this, you have to see a urologist. The doctor that they hired was a urologist.
Yeah.
But not everyone who sees a urologist gets testosterone. But apparently everyone who saw this urologist did.
They did, and he got away with that. Hulk Hogan, Terry Bollea took the stand and stuck up for McMahon. Only one person spoke out against McMahon, accusing him of having a role in this, and that person was proven to be not trustworthy, not a good witness, so he didn't get in trouble for any of the steroid stuff. To this point, he has not gotten in any real trouble for the Ring Boy stuff, but that is coming back up. And then, of course, today, John, the word trafficked is something that, even though I know it's more pronounced now, like people talk about it more because we're starting to realize how rampant it is, but it's still shocking to me to hear that word and think about what it actually means. And for that to come up in an allegation against anybody goes beyond mere assaults. And I don't want to say mere assault because it's awful to assault people, but it goes beyond.
It takes it another notch up for sure.
It does. And all these names of people that have been included. John Laurinaitis has been like Vince's right-hand man for years. Pat Patterson, who was included in some of the Ring Boys claims, like they continue to be there, like we've said before. So I just can't wrap my head around getting to a point in my life where I feel so powerful that I crave to have complete control over people's lives and to exercise that in ways that are just so deplorable.
Yeah, absolutely. And this, again, is all allegations at this point. There are investigations underway, and we will keep you updated. We usually do those updates on Patreon, so definitely be on the lookout for those updates over there, because hopefully in 2025 we'll know who the real Vince McMahon was.
And I mean, yes, at this point these are legal allegations, but note he has settled with at least 5 women that we know of. So
absolutely. And again, I mean, he may have unlimited money, but even if I have unlimited money, I'm not going to give it away willy-nilly.
Yeah,
if you're lying on me, we're going to court.
Just want to give a few quotes to some former and present WWE superstars about Vince. We did reach out to our friend Chris Jericho about this, and he very wisely noted that it's a no-win scenario for him to speak out on this. He didn't reach out, or he didn't respond to Netflix when they reached out, so he politely declined this. But there are some quotes out there. This comes from Maria Kanellis, and said she hoped justice is served here. She says, many of us experienced or heard rumors of different levels of evil for years. Some tried to speak up to build momentum to change the culture in WWE. Many times we've been called bitter or crazy. Others have been paralyzed by fear. So she's claiming not only is this an environment where these things can happen, but where covering them up is the expectation. Another former member of the WWE roster, Dutch Mantel, really old school wrestler, said in a podcast that these allegations fit the man who he knew as Vince. He says, where there's smoke, there's fire. And again, Dutch Mantel is one of those old school guys, not somebody that's looking to get his name out there. You're not going to hear from him very much. Former wrestler Tori Wilson said that she felt mortified and pressured to participate in highly sexualized segments. If you go back and watch anything with Vince from the late 90s, it's going to involve a woman that's not his wife, and it's going to involve some type of sexual element, even on screen. Now, what are they doing on screen? He was making out with them. He was talking about sexual stuff with them. It was bad. There is somebody who came forward to defend McMahon, which a lot of people are not looking to do right now. This is Teddy Long, again, a longtime presence in professional wrestling. He said, if this did happen, I can't see Vince or anybody else. If all this woman wanted was $3 million, Vince ain't a dumb person. If this was very true, I can't not see him not giving her $3 million, sign whatever it is, and be done with it, which it sounds like a lot of people have done things like that, have said things like that. I'm going to go a little more old school here, John. I got some quotes from some guys from our childhood.
All right.
Bret the Hitman Hart says, I always had respect for him. Now it's tainted. I'm embarrassed that I thought so highly of him. This comes from Jake the Snake Roberts on his Snake Pit podcast. I believe the man is partially insane. He's drunk with power. He has been for a long time. It didn't surprise me, and that bothers me. For me to be able to say that doesn't surprise me, it leaves me thinking, man, this is pretty disgusting crap you're looking at here, and it doesn't surprise me. And then one of Vince's biggest advocates over the years is Mick Foley, also known as Cactus Jack, Mankind, Dude Love. He was thrown off a cage by The Undertaker in one of the most exciting moments in history. And he said that anyone who's listened to a single episode knows the fondness I have for Mr. McMahon. I don't know all the facts, but man, it's really ugly. I feel some very similar, just like that dead feeling inside, the way I had in 2007 after the Benoit murders. So some big statements from some big names. Like I said, a lot of people not wanting to speak out, and there are several anonymous quotes here as well, but several people not wanting to speak out, but the people that are speaking, I think, have important voices historically to be able to say this falls in line with the character of the Vince McMahon that I know, to me, is a big deal. Some of these allegations are going to be criminal. Everything we've seen him in before, steroid stuff was legal, but he got out of it. And everything else has been civil. So is this going to be the time that he gets brought down on criminal charges for either the Ring Boy scandal or for the Janelle Grant allegations and similar allegations? I don't know. If it's true, I hope he does go to prison for all of this. You know, you hate to see, I mean, that would confirm that this happened to these people. I'd rather it didn't happen to them. But if it did, I hope that he goes down and that everything that he has done wrong comes to light and we get as much justice as we can for these people. Sorry, John. I know I just talked for a long time.
No, that's all right. And absolutely, I do want justice. And I'm glad that the statute of limitations is no longer an option on the table. I think I think a lot of this could have already been wrapped up had that not been an option, that there was a statute of limitations in place for some of those crimes. So
specifically the ring boys, there was a law that was changed in Maryland to allow that to happen.
So yeah, I hope that what was done in the dark will come to the light and that justice will be served.
We will absolutely keep you posted. We do a lot of case updates over on TikTok and Instagram. So if you're not following us over there, we're at True Crime Cast at both. And we do a lot of short videos, just kind of giving small updates. We also give those on Patreon. So anytime you're looking for a case update, you can find some there.
All right, guys, that's going to do it. Remember, you can use code 2025 for 10% off your first month or an annual membership over on patreon.com.
We hope you have a great start to your 2025, and we'll be back with more true content all year long.
Until next crime, this has been True Crime Cast.
You've listened to True Crime Cast, distributed by Stoveleg Media. Check out stoveleg.com to find out more about your hosts and to find other podcasts to listen to. Stoveleg Media, igniting conversation.
Hey, gang. As true crime fans, we know there's always more to the story. And the start of a new year is a perfect time to start digging deeper into the mysteries that fascinate you with newspapers.com. The largest online newspaper archive.
Imagine uncovering the original articles that reported on infamous crimes or tracking down small town stories that haven't been told in decades. A subscription to newspapers.com unlocks over 1 billion, with a B, newspaper pages from across the US, UK, Canada, Australia, and beyond, dating all the way back to 1690 or as recent as a month ago.
You'll have access to stories that you will not find anywhere else. From front page headlines to forgotten cases that could inspire your next deep dive. Go down a rabbit hole of first-hand accounts, breaking news, and shocking details that didn't make the history books, all on newspapers.com.
For listeners of this podcast, newspapers.com is offering a special discount of 20%. Just use the code TrueCrimecast at checkout. The clues to history's mysteries are waiting for you on newspapers.com using code TrueCrimecast.